Alright. Hello guys. Good to be here. Good to see you all. Good to talk to you all. Well, I guess I don't really see you right now. Hello. This is M967. But the majority of you probably just know me as Matt. As a lot of people have referred to me as that when I'm playing games with them, whatnot. Yeah. So don't really know what I'm doing, honestly. Thought I'd make a podcast, see how it goes. So yeah, that's what we're doing. That's what we're up to. So wanted to talk just about random things, just about anything really. Yeah. Cause sometimes it's just nice to talk. Sometimes it's nice to get out of your own head, or spill your thoughts and emotions and all that, and just be out there with it all. So that's always nice. Let's see. Well, first of all, one thing that really came to my mind as I was trying to think of, what kind of things would I talk about during the podcast? What kind of stuff would I do? One thing that really came to mind a lot, especially just a minute ago, I was sitting there scrolling through Instagram and came across just this random one-off video type thing, as you do on Instagram, and it was by a guy and calling himself Passion Child. Never heard of him before. Literally just found out about him 10-20 minutes ago or so, something like that. Sorry, got a bit of gas. Anywho, but as I was sitting there listening to the music that he posted, first song I've ever heard by the guy, and it's called what's it called? I just downloaded it too. It's a really good song. Truth Is. The song itself is called Truth Is. Does this make it louder? Maybe? Yes? Yes. Okay. Just wanted to make sure I know where my mic is at and whatnot. Anywho, the song itself is called Truth Is, and it's a song that hits hard. Maybe this is a bit better for my recording, whatnot. Anywho, his song is inspired by the fact that it is currently National Suicide Prevention Month. And it starts off, the first line of the song is, truth is, if it wouldn't hurt my mom so bad, I'd kill myself. I don't know, you don't know if you've ever heard of him. The guy is actually really small. He's got a really small following, whatnot. But the style of music is kind of like I think he's called NF, I do believe. But essentially, once I heard that first line, it's just like, I want to hear the rest of the song. I want to download the song, whatnot. I want to be able to listen to the song on a regular basis, because as someone who has struggled off and on with hints of depression throughout life, whatnot, something like this really hits. A lot of people kind of brush depression off, and they treat it as though it's not what it really is, And there's a lot of misconceptions about it. Depression isn't necessarily just not feeling happy, it's not just being sad, it's the feeling of loneliness. And loneliness itself is also surrounded by a lot of misconceptions. Loneliness, a lot of people think, oh, you just feel alone all the time. Well, not necessarily. loneliness isn't just feeling like you're alone. Loneliness is being in a room full of people and feeling like nobody sees you. You know, and it's a similar idea with depression and whatnot. You know, like a lot of people are like, oh, depression, you're sad all the time and this and that. And no, it's really not. Like, depression is something that's a lot more serious than that. Depression is just, you're always lonely, and on top of that loneliness, a lot of the time you feel like extremely anxious, feel extremely stressed, and you don't know why. You feel like something bad is going to happen, even though everything around you seems to be going good. You know? And then on top of that, on top of all of that, and on top of the loneliness and everything, it's really like loneliness in the fact of you feel like no matter what you do, you're never going to make a difference. You feel like no matter where you go, no matter how hard you try, you will never affect anything in life. You know, sorry. I have a bit of weird speech pattern, if you ask me. I stutter, I say and you know. But for people who do feel like that, I'm telling you right now, you aren't alone. You know, there is somebody out there who sees you and who recognizes you. You know, I mean, I understand really well how hard it is to feel like people actually want you around, and how hard it is to feel that people care about you. You know, I mean, I didn't exactly have the best life growing up. I'm not going to go into detail, but I haven't exactly had the best life. And there are times now where I still just like, nobody even wants me around. Nobody wants me here. Nobody cares. and it takes a lot. Like, it really takes a lot to recognize and understand, no, people do care. People do want me around. Even if it's just a single person, you know? But honestly, that idea that maybe it is just a single person, that's what helps me get through the most. And that's what helps me out the most. Because when you do feel lonely and you do feel depressed, whatnot, you know, like I said earlier, it's like it's those ideas that I'm in a room full of people and nobody even sees me. Nobody even knows that I'm here. I'm in a room full of people who are all going to go and do all these great things, and I'm going to sit here and just waste away and do nothing, and I'll never amount to anything. And so it's that one person that recognizes you and acknowledges you that helps the most, honestly. Because that one person can help get rid of the loneliness. That one person can be that light in your life. It's essentially just, hey, you're not just going to fade away. You're not just going to go into nothingness. You do matter. You are important. And that can be a really heavy hitting thing. That can be like a really important thing for somebody who's depressed, who's lonely, suicidal, whatnot, you know. But at the same time, like, not everybody who is suicidal is depressed or lonely or anything like that, you know. Not everyone is going to show the same symptoms or or act the same way or think the same way as everybody else when they're suicidal. And that's probably the biggest stigma we have around suicide. and around suicidal people, the idea that everyone who is suicidal is depressed or lonely or anxious or so forth and so forth and so forth. The idea that they're all the same in that way. But really, not everybody's like that. Not everybody's lonely, not everybody's depressed, not everybody's anxious. You don't have to be any of those things to be suicidal. Yes, those are big, big contributing factors, but those aren't the only factors. Recognition of suicidal tendencies is important because it really helps you understand the person themselves, and why they might be suicidal. You could come across the happiest seeming person in the world, somebody who enjoys life to their fullest, who is eager and ready for the next day to come, and then all of a sudden, you wake up the next morning, and they're not there. And you get a hold of the people who live with them, who are around them on a regular basis, and they're like, hey, where's so-and-so? And you get that dreadful message of, they just killed themselves. Suicide doesn't discriminate. Suicide and suicidal tendencies, suicidal thoughts, they don't, they're not specific to a certain type of person. They don't try and say, oh, well, this person thinks this and this and this and this, or this is their ethnicity, or any. No. Suicidal thoughts and tendencies can hit anybody at any time. And that's the most important thing that people need to understand and realize in order to help combat suicidal thoughts and tendencies. Because like I said, you don't need to be depressed to be suicidal. Now, yes, saying, oh, they're the happiest person you know, that is contradictory to what I said earlier about depression, just about it, just you being sad. But what I'm trying to convey is that someone can be genuinely happy, they're ready for anything life throws at them, just complete opposite of depression, anxiety, loneliness, whatnot. They could be the shining star image of perfect mental health and be suicidal. Because at its core, suicide and suicidal thoughts and tendencies boil down to the idea that the second I vanish, nobody cares. Nobody's going to notice. And while, yes, this helps, depression, loneliness, things like that can contribute to it by far. They most definitely do. So can other. It's not just necessarily those types of things. So can pessimism, nihilism, whatnot. All kinds of things like that. You don't have to be depressed to be suicidal. And that's what a lot of people think. That's what a lot of people say. Oh, well, they killed themselves. They must have been depressed. No, they weren't. Oh, well, they were lonely. No. Anxious. No. Well, what was wrong with them? That's another thing. That's another big thing. People always assume that if you're suicidal, there's something wrong with you. And that's another big stigma. That's another big problem that we need to face and that we need to challenge and get rid of in order to prevent suicide, in order to bring those numbers down, because currently some rough estimated 800,000 people per year kill themselves. 800,000. Suicide is one of the leading causes of death in the world. And mind you, that 800,000 is just the United States. At least I do believe. I could be wrong about that. I don't know. But still, 800,000 is 800,000. 800,000 people per year want to end their own lives and succeed in doing so. That's terrible. That is absolutely horrible. But again, one of the biggest stigmas is people always, their immediate response was, well, what was wrong with them? You shouldn't treat mental illness as something that's wrong with a person, or suicidal thoughts and tendencies. Your first response should not be what was wrong with them, because there's nothing wrong with them. In all honesty, there isn't something specific wrong with them. Going back to our example from just a minute ago of how somebody who's the perfect image of mental health can still be suicidal because of pessimism, nihilism, whatnot. And for those of you who don't know, pessimism is essentially glass is half empty type people. Oh, well, things are always going to go bad. That's pessimistic. And you don't have to be depressed or anxious or lonely to be pessimistic. And then nihilism. Nihilism is essentially it's a form of existentialism, where you don't try and search for meaning of life in other things. You search for it in yourself. And the reason why pessimism, it makes sense why it could lead to suicidal thoughts and tendencies. But nihilism doesn't necessarily make sense at first. Nihilism makes you kind of question, well, how does looking for self-worth, how does looking for the meaning of life in yourself make you suicidal? And the reason it does is because oftentimes people who are nihilistic and those who commit suicide, they look into themselves for that meaning, for that reason to exist, and find nothing. They can't find anything. Nihilism says that only you can determine your reason to live. Only you can be your source of a reason to live. So that negative aspect of nihilism makes it to where you're like, okay, well, if I'm my only reason for living and I can't find a reason within myself for me to live, then I shouldn't. And it's things like that lead to suicide. I have no reason for living, therefore I shouldn't. And then the negative thoughts that come with suicide just swelter and swelter and swelter and grow and grow and grow. And eventually it's an issue that's a lot bigger than it originally was. Originally it's just, oh, well, I can't find meaning in myself. And then that makes you question, well, if I'm gone, do people care? Is anybody even going to cry when I die? Is anybody going to miss me? Have I made an impact on anybody? And it just swelters and swelters and grows until eventually it becomes too much. It gets to a point where one bad day could send you over the edge. And that's the biggest problem. That's one of the biggest things that we need to face in order to help prevent suicide. We need to change the way we look at and the way we perceive what we understand about suicide. You should never just assume that somebody has something wrong with them. They don't necessarily have something wrong with them. Not everybody who's suicidal is depressed or anxious or anything like that, or has mental disabilities or disorders. A lot of them are they just don't know what to do. They're lost in life. Would you shut up? Sorry about that. Thin walls, whatnot. I don't have any soundproofing on my walls either. That would be really useful. That would be really nice. Anywho, but we shouldn't treat them as if there's something wrong, because there's not necessarily something wrong. And there are some people who go to the extreme, who commit suicide because of extremes such as no one will ever love me, and they think, well, this person that I'm best friends with, that I've started to grow feelings for, they might love me. They might feel that same way. I found my reason to live. And so they go to them about that, and they tell them how they feel, and they ask them to go out with them, whatnot. But the other person doesn't feel the same way. And so they're honest with them, and they don't even realize that they've almost essentially just signed that person's death certificate. They've unknowingly proven that person's mental image of themselves, their mental image of their own worthlessness. They've unknowingly proven it to them and given that person all the reason they need to kill themselves. And it's horrible. Like, suicide is something that the best way that we're going to be able to fight it is by talking about it, is by being open with our loved ones and with our friends and the people around us about it. The best way to get rid of it is to talk about it and address it. Make it the elephant in the room. Turn it into the elephant in the room. Address those people. Put them in that situation. And it seems contradictory to do that. It may seem contradictory to force somebody who might be suicidal to talk about the fact that they're suicidal. But in all reality, this is what's going to help the most. Because now, this person who's sitting there feeling like nobody even knows that they exist, nobody even cares if they're gone, is now being addressed directly and being spoken to by other people and being shown that other people do care. And that's the main thing that a lot of people need. That's the main thing that suicidal people need. They need to be shown that other people do care. They need to be shown that somebody is there for them. That people will cry if they die. That the second they're gone, that they're not just going to fade away. Find comfort in whatever you find comfort in. And if you are having suicidal thoughts or tendencies, I encourage you to talk to somebody you trust, to just reach out to somebody. Reach out and talk to somebody. And if you think nobody's going to want to listen to me, reach out and talk to me. I will listen. I will always listen to anybody who's struggling with suicidal thoughts or tendencies. You know, my email, mdog967@gmail.com. Reach out to me. Even if I don't respond immediately, reach out. Because I know that through my own personal experience, just the idea that somebody might listen, or just the idea that even if they don't respond, I can sit there and text somebody and get something off of my chest and talk to them about the fact that I'm just struggling. That has been a massive help for me. You know, if you absolutely need someone to talk to, there is the suicide prevention hotline, which I will leave the number 2 in the link, or I'll leave the number 2 in the description and whatnot. But a lot of people just need to hear that. Just need to talk. Just need to talk to somebody. Just need to say something. They need to get away from being themselves for a minute and just be able to talk. They need that fresh set of ears. Talk to somebody who doesn't know. Because sometimes that is the best thing for it. Talking to someone who doesn't know about your situation. That could be a massive help. You know, and so sometimes the best people to talk to, if you are having suicidal thoughts or tendencies, sometimes the best people to talk to aren't your friends. Because a lot of the time, your friends know. They know what you're going through. They know you talk to them about these things already. But even though you know you have your friends who you can talk to, it's still right there at the front of your mind, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing, and you try and talk to your friends about it, but it just doesn't help. That's why things like the suicide prevention hotline exist. Because sometimes talking to the people who do know doesn't help. Sometimes it feels like anybody that you know, that you talk to about it, it's not going to help. And so the best thing to do in that situation is to... sorry. It's getting kind of late. But in that situation, the best thing to do is to reach out to somebody that doesn't know. That doesn't know you. Because when you can disassociate yourself with yourself and talk about your problems, you've allowed yourself to stop forcing whatever smile you do for everybody else and just break down. And sometimes it's helpful to break down. Having a mental breakdown isn't necessarily a bad thing. Mental breakdowns, while yes, they are primarily bad, it's only... Mental breakdowns, I kind of classify them in 2 ways. A violent and a non-violent one. A violent mental breakdown are the ones that are bad, where you're shaking, you're spasming, whatnot, heavy PTSD reaction, just, you can't calm yourself down, you're just freaking out, you're in this state of panic, and panicking and panicking and panicking and panicking, and you don't know why and you can't stop it, that is a violent breakdown. A non-violent breakdown is when essentially you cut off, you space out, and you just cry. And you just sit there in this state of non-necessity, I guess you could call it. But you just sit there in this state of calm and pain, and you just let it all out. These are the kind of mental breakdowns that are probably best to have just because of the fact of you're not a danger to yourself or the people around you. And not only that, but it allows you to get all the emotion and everything out without furthering your own panic, without intensifying the feelings that led to your breakdown. Got a nice big water bottle. Okay. But when you can have a mental breakdown like that, it is one of the most therapeutic things out there. Just stepping back, sitting down, and crying. You know? And a lot of people, I'm going to be bringing up stigma a lot in this podcast because the main theme of this podcast, if you couldn't tell, is going to be suicide prevention, whatnot. Identifying suicidal people, all that. So one of the things that's going to be talked about a lot is stigma. But anywho, there seems to be a pretty big stigma about crying itself. You know, like anything in life can have its stigma. Everything in life has some sort of stigma about it. Sorry. No matter what it is, anything can be stigmatized in life. Just because of just human reaction and how people treat things. And one of the main stigmas around crying exists primarily for males, for guys. A lot of guys feel like they're not allowed to cry. You know, guys are always taught in life that if you get hurt or if something happens, you just shake it off and you walk away. You don't cry. You know, men are shown that crying is a sign of weakness. And nobody wants to be seen as weak. And that is a massive stigma with crying, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of guys can't find themselves able to have that non-violent breakdown. That mental breakdown where they just sit back and cry unless they're completely and utterly alone. And in today's society, it's hard to be on your own. It's hard to be away from other people. Now, it has been made somewhat easier by the whole pandemic whatnot thing going on. But at the same time, it's still harder than you might think. A lot of people think, oh, it's so easy to just be completely alone, you know? But at the same time, you're never really completely alone. You know, if you live in a house with other people, there's other people in the house. If you go out into public, there's other people out in public. go to school, go to work, whatnot. We live in a world where we are constantly being surrounded by other people. And this is both a good thing and a bad thing when it comes to mental breakdowns and suicide prevention, whatnot. Because when you're surrounded by other people and you go into a violent breakdown, when you have a violent breakdown, it's best for other people to be there. Because when you have a violent breakdown, then you can actually get help. Other people can actually help you. Whereas, again, with the stigma with crying, a lot of guys will go into that violent breakdown because of the fact that there are people around. And, you know, it's easier to get away with the violent breakdown than it is with the non-violent breakdown, because you're just freaking out with the violent breakdown. Things are getting more and more and more and more and more intense. Whereas with the non-violent breakdown, it makes guys feel like they're weak. And that is a really big stigma for guys. You know, crying is something that's seen as baby-like. It's seen as a lot of guys see it as an expression of weakness or acting like a child. But in all honesty, in all reality, there's nothing childish or weak about crying. And this makes it where men are more prone to a violent breakdown and women are more prone to a non-violent breakdown. Because with the non-violent breakdown, you know, when one woman starts crying, or one girl or whatever, she immediately draws in the attention of others. She's crying, what's wrong, what can we do? When a guy starts having a violent breakdown, he's drawing in attention, but he's not drawing in that negative attention. People start panicking, okay, what can we do to help? How can we calm him down? Whereas if a girl has a violent breakdown, a lot of people I know it is more stigmatized for a girl to have a violent breakdown. I can't personally explain why very well because of the fact that, yes, I am male. So I'm not the best to explain it. I'm not going to try to explain it because I don't want to be completely wrong about it. Because at least with the things I've talked about up to this point, I can relate to. I do know what I'm saying. This is how I was raised. This is what I've been taught throughout my life. This is one of the things I've struggled with, you know. So with a guy having a non-violent breakdown in public, like, it just makes him feel just terrible. You know, it makes him feel like everybody's looking down on him. And what starts off as a non-violent breakdown can end up turning into a violent breakdown because that much needed release of emotion that's been weighing him down turns into a panic. Because all these new emotions are just boiling on top because of the fact that he is releasing the other ones. And so now those new emotions that come in cause a state of panic, and it transitions from a non-violent breakdown to a violent breakdown. Sorry. And then for a girl, a violent breakdown could easily be turned into a non-violent breakdown because people people will more willingly rush to help a woman than they will a man. This is a proven fact. But she gets the comfort and help that she needs faster, and it calms her and soothes her and leads her to just cry. Leads her into the non-violent breakdown. Again, I can't properly explain the stigma around a violent breakdown for a woman. I'm not a woman. I am not female. But it stigma. The stigma though is the main thing that we need to battle. That's our first step. That's the first step we need to take, because if we can get rid of the stigma, then we can get rid of those negative emotions and those negative feelings, and we can do something. We can really start to fight the main issue. Men need to be shown that they are allowed to just let their emotions flow. And even if it's not the women around them pushing it, a lot of the times it's guys' friends who push the idea of, if you cry, you're weak. You know, minus very specific situations like a kick in the balls or something. But anywho, we need to get rid of that stigma. We need to get rid of that idea that, oh, you're weak if you cry, because that's not true. And we need to get rid of any stigma around, well, women having a violent breakdown, because sometimes you need the violent breakdown. It's not a good thing to have, but sometimes you need it. Sometimes you need the violent breakdown in order to get to the non-violent breakdown. Sometimes you need to sit there and panic and confuse yourself and frustrate yourself and worry over every little detail possible in order to be able to reach the point where you just can't take it anymore, and you just let the floodgates loose and have that non-violent breakdown and just let it all out. You know, like, these are the things that we need to address the stigma around, because having a mental breakdown is one of the biggest things that's been stigmatized, and it is probably the worst thing that has been stigmatized, because you need mental breakdowns. You need them. When you are struggling with suicidal thoughts or tendencies, or depression, or anxiety, loneliness, anything like that, you need mental breakdowns, because without those mental breakdowns, you have no release. You know, and one of the things that really pushes suicidal thoughts and tendencies is that lack of a release. Is that lack it is that lack of a capability to get everything off your chest. And that's one of the main things people struggle with, because of the stigma around mental breakdowns. Mental breakdowns are always viewed as this bad thing, but they're not a bad thing. And so we need to change how we perceive mental breakdowns, first and foremost. We need to change the fact that people think, oh, a mental breakdown, that's a bad thing. No, not necessarily. A mental breakdown can be a really good thing. Sometimes you need that mental breakdown. Sometimes you need to just freak out and lose yourself a little. Sometimes you need to just let out that emotion. Because if you don't let it out, it's only going to get worse. It's just going to build and build and build and build and build, and it will get worse and worse and worse until you do get to that point where one bad thing happens and you're over the edge. That one bad thing is enough to make you give up on everything. Now, another thing, going back to what I talked about towards the start with that song I heard. Truth is, y'all need to go over on YouTube. If I put this up on YouTube, probably will. Shit. Y'all need to go over onto YouTube, go to Passion Child's channel, and watch the absolute fuck out of Truth Is, and listen to the absolute fuck out of Truth Is. Because coming from somebody who has had suicidal thoughts in the past, thankfully not in a long time, I can't say that much, but coming from somebody who has had those thoughts and ideas and been in that place, that song hits like a brick. Like I said, the song opens with Truth Is, if it wouldn't hurt my mom so bad, I'd kill myself. If it wouldn't make my dad so mad, I'd kill myself. If it wouldn't make my sister weak, I'd kill myself. I guess I love them more than I love myself. And honestly, dude's like slapped in the face right there. Because for somebody who is suicidal, depressed, anxious, whatnot, it's those little connections that mean the entire world. Knowing the fact that just those three people, your mom, dad, and sister, in the case of the song, or it could be anybody. It could be just one person. It could be your best friend. You know, it could be just one of your parents. It could be just one of your siblings. It could be your entire family. It could be all your friends. It could be anybody. Anybody at all. Just one person. Just knowing that one person is going to be affected because you're gone, that could save lives. That could literally save lives. Because, like I talked about earlier, suicidal thoughts and tendencies aren't just depression, you know. Sometimes it's just nobody cares if I'm gone. Nobody. And something like that, and when it is like that, which it usually is, whatever has led to it, they need to be addressed and shown. It needs to be addressed, and they need to be shown we do care. There are people who do care. There are people who, the second you're gone, they're going to be hit hard. They won't be able to handle it. They won't be able to deal with it. because they did care. You know? And so we absolutely need to address all the stigmas around suicide. The stigma towards mental breakdowns, the stigma about mental health itself, which suggests that when somebody's depressed, that it's wrong. The idea that if somebody wants to kill themselves, that there's something wrong with them. We need to address these things and show these people there isn't something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. You're just hurting. It's okay to hurt. It's okay to not be okay despite what you've been shown. We need to address these stigmas and get rid of them. Because once we get rid of this stigma, we can start saving more and more and more and more lives. And that would be the best outcome. Now, the sad thing is, this probably isn't going to get heard by more than 10 people. It's not going to be heard by a big crowd. There's going to be a couple people who listen to it. And I doubt anybody's going to even get this far. If you do listen to this, if you're listening to this right now and you've gotten this far, I'd appreciate it if you'd pause, just stop listening for a second, throw it to the side, and have it playing in the background, pause it, whatever you need to do, and contact somebody that you're worried about. Get a hold of them. Get a hold of anybody that you're worried about, that you think might be leaning towards suicidal thoughts or tendencies. Get a hold of them. And just ask if they're okay. Talk to them. And if they need to have a breakdown, let them have that breakdown. Talk to them. Let them know that it's all right. Show them, remind them that you care. You care about them, and that you don't want them gone. Just talk to them. Just talk. Because talking can save lives. An example of this, not a personal example, would be a story from game theorist, film theorist, food theorist, whatever, Matt Pat. I'm sure you've all heard of him at one point or another. But a couple years ago, recent history, two things. First of all, first and foremost, sadly, one of the theorist team members took their own life. Ronnie Edwards, rest in peace, dude. He did a lot of animations. He had his own channel where he talked about things like lag, whatnot, just basic gaming principles. Rest in peace, Ronnie. Rest in peace, man. And I'm sorry you're gone. But anywho, A few years ago, one of Matt Pat's videos talked about, in the video, he was giving a speech or something, and he talked, okay, it's telling me I've got a 60-minute limit, I can get this done within that. He was talking about how him saying hi to a person saved their life, and essentially how the story goes is he met a kid in his theater class, and he'd always showed up to theater early to set up chairs and whatnot, and he walked up to him, and he just said hi. And he started talking to him, and he introduced himself, talked to the other kid, found out who he was, and just talked to him, treated him like a normal person. And they went on to go about doing things over the span of the school year, and eventually when they went to go somewhere, they got off the bus, and the other kid told him, hey, thank you for saving my life. And he's like, what are you talking about? And he told him that the other kid told him that he had been planning to commit suicide that very day, that first day, that he was ready to take his own life. He had it all planned out. He was going to kill himself. And if nobody had talked, and if it weren't for the fact that somebody had walked up and talked to him, he would have done it. So never doubt the impact of your words. Never doubt the impact that you have on another person's life. Because you saying just the littlest things to somebody, something that you think is insignificant, that could mean the entire world to somebody. That could be their difference between life and death. So just keep that in mind. That's about all I've got time for. I've only got like 2.5 minutes left. Yeah. Thank you all for listening. Sorry that my first podcast is a bit more depressing. But it is something we need to address. It is something that needs to be talked about more. It's something that I feel very close to personally and whatnot because of the things I've gone through, because of the thoughts I've had in the past. But just thank you for listening. If you listen this far, I don't know if I'll ever do another podcast. I hope to. I plan to. But this is all for now. And, yeah. I guess I will see you guys next time. And again, if you know somebody who's struggling, go talk to them. Go help them. Do whatever you can to make a difference. Because in the end, it's those little things that do make a difference. So once again, thank you for listening. And I will talk to you guys another time. Have a great day. And go change your life. Bye.